In this episode, a plane tries to land in the workshop. We do a reenactment, a lot of sanding, and lots of other cool stuff, so stick around. Hi guys, and welcome back to the show. Today we continue building the mid-century modern inspired footstool. And if you haven't seen the first videos, I'll post a link up here to the playlist. So let's not waste any time and get right down to it. Oh, by the way, it's not inspired by a mid-century modern footstool. It's inspired by this. This set of mid-century modern nightstands I found on Pinterest was the inspiration for the build. This is the design I came up with in SketchUp. I tried to use the golden ratio, but I ended up changing some of the dimensions later in the project. When I left you guys last time, we had just clamped up the upper frame of the stool. It was a little bit wobbly, so I'll try to level it out with my planer. And I also used the planer to get rid of the excess glue from the other laminations. The frame for the upper part of the stool just fit on top of the planer, and if I'm ever doing this again, I'm giving myself a little bit more wiggle room here. A few passes and the frame was more or less level. Then I prepared the top panel for lamination, and like always I used my trusty ketchup bottle to squeeze out the glue, and a piece of cardboard to spread the PVA. And also a few wet wipes to get rid of the excess glue. And I could just clamp the thing up and use my impromptu panel clamps, and Bob's your uncle. Clamp monster! I cut the rebates for the legs on my DIY router table with the cut down IKEA shelf as a fence, and using an offcut to support the back of the workpiece really reduced the amount of tear out. And as you can see, the rebates turned out quite nice. It was time to do a test fit using some spacers that I've cut to position the legs where I wanted them. And now you can really start to see what the shape of the stool is going to look like. Then it was over to my belt and disc sander, and I'm probably going to say this a few times in this video, but I needed to use quite coarse grits to affect this rock hard oak in any kind of way. I tried sanding the frame on the belt, but the belt was a bit short, and I ended up making like a huge dent. You can see it here in the middle of the picture. It was the wheel on the belt that made this dent, so I took off the stop and sanded down the frame using the whole area of the belt. It worked a lot better. And to be honest, I think that the simple joinery on this frame started to look quite nice here. Then it was back to sanding. I did a lot of sanding on this project. A lot. To sand the legs I screw down an offcut to support them, and this is one of the advantages of having a work surface on your bench that you don't really care that much about. You can just screw stuff down to it. Then the legs of the stool needed to be glued together, and I spread the glue in the joints with my finger, pressed the joint together and clamped it with my Wolfcraft corner clamps. I also used a couple of F-clamps to really get some pressure onto those joints. I glued together the second leg frame the same way. Then I placed the legs on some old IKEA shelves and weighed them down to get them more or less flat. After the glue up, it was time to check if the legs were aligned properly. And also the lamination of the top panel was done. Turned out really nice, to be honest. Needs a lot more love though. I made the top panel too wide, but I forgot to film when I ripped it down on my DIY table saw. So here is a Keith Brown style reenactment for you. Using my miter saw, I cut the top panel roughly to its final length. Then I used my router setup to cut the rebates to allow what is essentially a lid to drop down into the frame. This time I did the cut a little bit differently. I started with the full depth, and then I kept increasing the thickness, trying to creep onto a good fit on top of the frame. It took a few tries to get the fit I wanted. I don't want it too tight because I want to allow for a little bit of movement in the wood. Man, listen to this router, guys. It sounds like a plane coming into land. I had left the top a little bit long on purpose, and here's another tip I caught from Keith Brown. If you want to creep up on a cut, you push the workpiece against the saw blade. That makes the saw blade flex a tiny bit, and you can just raise the saw and make the cut. It's a really nice way of creeping up on your cuts. The rebates needed a little bit of cleaning up, and I just did that with a normal knife and some sandpaper. So then it was back to the ketchup bottle and time for a new glue up. So this was the final decision on which side was supposed to be up. And then you know the drill. All the clamps in the world. And by the way, I wish I had more, to be honest. So there you have it, guys. We've made another clamp monster.
And by the way, I changed my recording technique and microphone somewhere in this video. If you have any comments on the audio quality in this video, I'd really like your feedback on that. But however, that is it for today, guys. I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please remember to leave a thumbs up. If this is your first visit to my channel, please consider subscribing. You'll find a Patreon link and affiliate links to products I use and recommend below. Cheers, guys, and I'll catch you in the next one.